Hey, this is Elliot. Just wanted to jump on and let you know that the episode you're about to hear was recorded about a month ago, back at the beginning of May. So certain facts and figures we discuss, such as the tariff rate, are different than at the time of recording, but there's still a lot of great takeaways in this conversation from Fred and Ray, and we hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening.
It's the talk of the table.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Elliot.
What's the talk of the table?
Today, we are sitting down with Fred Hicks from Evil Hat Games and Ray Chou from Mythworks for a roundtable discussion about the current state of TTRPG publishing and the challenges facing publishers of all sizes due to the political landscape in the United States, the threat of AI, and quite frankly, a whole lot more. Fred, Ray, welcome to the table.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
Thanks
so much for
coming.
being here. So, there's a lot going on in TTRPG publishing, but we talked a little bit off mic that we don't want this to be all doom and gloom. I'm sure we'll get to doom and gloom, but we want to kind of have a frank discussion about what the industry, where the industry is at, where publishing is at. We're, currently in the midst of an environment, for listeners who don't know, where all of us are facing an untenable 145% tariff on imports from China. We're also facing this rise of the use of generative AI and these other things Brian mentioned, but that's the bad news. I do want to just start with a little bit of good stuff. I think that, we can all agree TTRPGs have been growing in recent years, and I think that the two of you represent companies that are companies we are excited about, and we're very excited about the growth that you've seen. So our first question we want to dive into before we get to the doom and gloom is, what is giving you hope in TTRPG publishing right now?
What gives me hope, honestly, is communities like Itch rising up in the last few years. Like I wasn't even aware of Itch happening until one of the people at Evil Hat came to me and said, we should really have a presence on Itch. There's a lot of community activity there. I'm like, there's a community somewhere and I'm not aware of it. Oh, crap. Yeah, we got our stuff onto Itch a while back. And first and foremost, we're there for the community and to make sure that we're there alongside many of the people whose works we're interested in have occasionally published, as in the case with Ray Najati with Apocalypse Keys. I think also that has helped in terms of increasing visibility of folks who are going it alone, folks who are maybe a marginalized voice, but they can still have a decent presence, linkable presence on there that lets people contribute money towards them. So I think there's a good push for people being able to still have their games available even when many economic pressures might cause certain companies to go away. There's the doom and gloom right there, but I'm going to shove it to the side. We're all silver lining here. I just think that's a good, healthy sign for the design community. And that's gotten me pretty happy. I've also been pretty happy with with at least my intersection with, I should say this, the state of discourse on Blue Sky, which a bunch of people seem to have migrated to, following Twitter becoming a hell site. Oh, go away, darkness.
No, we can talk shit about Twitter. That's that's a silver lining. Now.
Yeah, talk shit about Twitter at any time. Cool, check. So yeah, I think that's what's coming to mind for me.
I want to echo that. I think that the community side of things is awesome. I think that TTRPGs, it feels like they're growing, indie TTRPGs especially. I think I saw some data from IVC2 that we basically had 30 or 40% growth the last 3 years ago and 2 years ago. And I think this past year was a little bit less according to their data. So it seems like our little corner of the tabletop world is growing. Personally, qualitatively, I feel a lot of excitement. I feel like there's a lot of new players constantly coming in. I feel like there's a major shift away from that dragon game, which is really, really cool. And it's exciting to see people more willing to try new things. And in communities like Itch, really innovating and coming up with new and awesome stuff. There's so many cool games, so many cool designers that are popping off, and so many micro communities, and that's really what's exciting for me. Micro communities, especially. I was a member of the Blades in the Dark kind of hacking community, and that's sort of where I got my bones at, and meeting all of those desires. So I know the power of having like small little cohorts of like, maybe 10, 20, 50, 100 people just talking about design and games and being excited and playtesting each other's games, and all kind of rising up together. I think that's super, super cool. I see it in places not only like Itch, but on TikTok and Blue Sky and in these little Discord servers. So I think as a whole, the hobby, especially on the indie side, is growing, and the stuff that Evil Hat and Mythworks is putting out, these type of games are slowly kind of becoming a little bit more mainstream, and there's more interest in our type of games. So that's really, really cool and exciting.
I mean, not to toot Evil Hat's horn too much, but I also discovered alongside the rest of the public in the last few weeks that Dropout's new show, Parlor Room, is going to have an episode with thirsty sort of lesbians on it. And, that kind of gave me hope too. And Dropout is, even with as much Dragon game stuff as happens on it, is a great kind of, I mean, I think it's going to be a lifeline for a lot of people in the hobby, because it has a very positive parasocial effect of kind of running alongside these folks that are, at least I think, culturally in the space that I kind of want to see tabletop gaming to be.
There's a word you both said in there, which I think is really key, is community, and like different and micro communities, and how in the face of like a lot of economic hardship, there is like a hope brought from community. And I'm curious, because this is something we've talked about with like designers and publishers, about investing in the community behind your games. And as like publishers of your sizes, I'm curious how you generally think about investing in community, and kind of in this moment, how your calculations are changing about what you can do to invest in community. Like, are you shifting more energy to that, or are you not able to put as much energy to it given the current state?
It's a great question. I have personally seen my focus shift more towards community over the past couple of months. And in thinking about it, there's like two main things. Number one, tabletop role-playing games are inherently a social activity. You are engaging in community when you're playing these games. So that's kind of the basis of everything that we do, really. And for a long time, when breaking into the industry, building up the Wild Sea and our other games, I've sort of maintained that the best way to market our games is to encourage people to play our games, and secondarily to talk about our games. But more recently, with the darkness happening, I made a very, I guess, pointed decision to be more public about what is happening and to be transparent and communicative about it, because I think it's important. I think right now there's an environment of fear. There's an environment of silence, and people are afraid to talk about what's happening. I saw that happening all around. I saw it not even happening necessarily in my private cohorts, in my my business circles, and much less everything else. So I was really shocked at that happening, especially thinking about when COVID was happening, and that's the last time I can think about a major economic interruption or a major thing happening. So in my business circles specifically, it's like, wow, everybody was talking about when COVID was happening and we all had to figure out what was going on. But nobody's talking about the economic stuff in these business circles right now, even though it's just as big as COVID. And that's really, really curious. And I think that signals to people being afraid. People don't want to get on the bad side of this administration and feel like they can't speak out, and have been a lot more muted in their conversation. And I made a decision to be more vocal, to write letters to Congress, but also to make content about that, and to take a stance recently and be like, hey, this is not okay. And that's like I would say in the past, Mythworks has been a little bit more apolitical, even though we're a new company. But it's a shift for me to straight up say like, no, this is not cool. Obviously, it affects us from a business standpoint, but just in general, this is not cool. And I want to be out there on record saying this is not cool. So I'm not silent, and so that the community knows where we stand on these issues.
Yeah. I think Ray's hitting a lot of the right points there. I mean, I think to the point of becoming more transparent with your communication with the public in general. I've been referred to by Jeff Tidball before as pathologically transparent. I tend to give up any amount of data that I can. And I started doing this pretty early on in Evil Hat's life cycle. We were founded in late 2005. And I think it was before the tens that I was already starting to do things like share sales numbers and so forth. And I think transparency is actually one of the ways that you can foster community, because the more people understand what's going on with you, the more likely they're going to have your back in other spaces where conversations are happening about you. One of the things I've thought about a lot in that regard is that usually the most malicious, wrong information will fill a vacuum of information. Because people will think about a Kickstarter where you're getting no updates and you're wondering when your thing's going to ship. The worst possible explanations are likely to be speculated into that void, right? But if you have a culture of transparency around your company and you're communicating openly about what's going on, there's somebody in that conversation who read the thing that, say, Sean Nittner shared about what's up with the hat this month, and they'll jump in and respond and so forth. So like there's a kind of a community as tabletop publishers autoimmune system, that effect that I think happens there in conversation that I think moves towards a positive community vibe because enough people understand it. So there's much less of the darker side of speculation about information that isn't being handed out. So I think that's a huge thing. We were talking about being okay to bash on Twitter. I will never call it X, Twitter earlier. So I'm going to say that the collapse of Twitter was also a huge loss of community. Twitter was probably one of our strongest. Yeah, I know for certain. It was one of our strongest drivers of traffic to like our crowd funds and our website and so forth when it was a healthy enough. I'm not going to say it was ever healthy, but it was a healthy enough environment to be in. And as things turned, more and more Nazi words, we made a decision that we're like, okay, we might echo a few announcements over there, but we're effectively ending our Twitter presence. It was a hard decision, but it was definitely made easier by the storm of crap that was swirling around and continues to. We aren't quite sure that Blue Sky has replaced that, but I've been very impressed with seeing like how well, even with smaller numbers, it has kind of filled that notionally. And as social media, alongside a social hobby, I think engagement in that is a pretty important part of a community, because you have to go where the communities are happening, not where you want them to happen. And also, that's going to be a little bit more organic. Like we could spin up a Discord server, but then we need to have all of the curation around that, like moderation, heavy stuff like that. Social media is kind of more distributed in that way. So that's, I think, a thing that we still have to be keeping an eye on, even as the options out there seem to be more and more dominated by toxic billionaires. We are also looking at Evil Hat. We've recently, last few months, spun up what we call a creator support program, which is for podcasters, streamers, content creators who are interested in our games, maybe don't have that big of an audience right now. And while we might not be able to afford to do like paid sponsorship things with them, we can still say, oh, do you need a PDF of this game that you're interested in? Here, we'll give it to you for free, kind of thing. There's a little bit of vetting process to get people in on that. Had like 2 rounds of influxes there right now, but we've been pretty happy with getting that started, because it's another way for us to do that kind of distributed through social media connection with the communities as they are happening naturally around the internet.
It is great that just the Evil Hat creator program is just any little bit of help for creators is huge, just because it's rough out here for everybody. And especially, we say the loss of Twitter, it's like slowly being replaced by Blue Sky, but we've also, recently seen, not too long ago, Dicebreaker gone. Recently, Polygon gone. Like there are just fewer and fewer spaces where you can find community, or you can find a place that will tell you maybe where to look for that community in a place that is like a Polygon or something.
It's true. Like it's been very depressing to watch tabletop media collapse alongside actual tabletop companies collapsing. Like that's the sign of the system in crisis. Right there. Like you might have a media collapse and you're like, okay, well that was venture capital doing something evil again. But if you've got multiples of these happening at times, that means that there's a larger movement than just an individual toxic billionaire doing something. So, not to get to the doom and gloom again, but
no, I think we might be time to get to the doom and gloom.
Here we go. Strap in, folks.
I think a good place to start is kind of the current state of things. And from both, and kind of looking at the current state of each of your companies and what your biggest concerns are right now on a very like fundamental, functional level. And then we can extrapolate out from that about the current state of the community as a whole. So Ray, starting with you, just because I know you guys made a big announcement about Slug Blaster recently. What is going on with Mythworks as a business, and how are you doing business wise, and also a little bit, quite frankly, how are you doing emotional wise? This is like an existential threat of something that both of you, and like, you know, extrapolating to us as well, people put a lot of their lives and care and joy and dedication to, and it's now being kind of threatened by forces beyond our control.
Yeah, I'll start with the second half first. Emotionally, I'm doing okay, actually. Surprisingly well, given all that's happening.
I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah, like it's this weird kind of disconnect, I guess, or dissonance. My personal things in my personal life are going well. Business is not going well, obviously, but still, it's like this weird kind of separation, and we have a little bit of runway. We don't have too much runway. I think we have about like 2 or 3 months of runway right now, basically. And so, we're definitely staring down the barrel of doom. And that comes with, having a growing company and trying to kind of expand our offerings and trying to do more. And then also trying to support more people, like full-time staff for the first time and freelancers and whatnot. And that is very challenging. The immediate threat of the recent kind of climate is obviously the delay of the Slug Blaster Game of the Year reprints that we announced recently. So we have about $30,000 worth of product that unfortunately we weren't able to get on a boat before Chinese New Year, essentially. And because we weren't able to get it on a boat before Chinese New Year, it is now privy to the Trump's tariffs, Trump's full 145%, as far as we know it, tariffs on China. There's a couple of things complicating that. Number one, this is a box game, which kind of funny enough, because I was very bullish on like box games like a year ago or 2 years. I was like, yeah, let's do everything in the box. And unfortunately, as soon as you include dice and other components into a box, even if it comes with a hardcover, it goes under a separate tariff classification code. And that is the main hiccup. As far as I understand it right now, and there is some conflicting reports and literature about it, but books are still exempt, tariff code 4909. I've like repeated it so many times over the last couple of weeks, I just like know it off the top of my head.
Impressive.
Yeah, so as far as we understand it, that is exempt. RPG books may or may not be classified under that, and there are different situations, and really I don't think anybody knows until the goods arrive at port, basically, and Customs Border Patrol actually does the inspection and goes through the paperwork and either chooses to flag it or doesn't choose to flag it, and everyone's in the same boat, literally, when it comes to that. So that's a bit of a threat, because like, unfortunately, as a small business, if we were to pay the full 145%, that would mean essentially like 47 grand. And we simply don't have that cash.
On top of the 30.
On top of the 30, which we've already paid, basically. So we simply don't have that capital on hand right now. Now, there are other levers that I can pull. Like if it push comes to shove, I can take out a loan. I can look for some angel investors or some capital investors, but that would solve the immediate situation, but then that would immediately put me into a riskier situation, like medium term, basically. And it's something that like I don't necessarily want to do, but obviously the options are kind of there, and we're exploring everything at this point. So that has a cascading effect, because one of the projects that we were going to do, that we are doing, is essentially a Slug Blaster expansion. And we wanted to a certain extent capitalize on the good press that we've gotten for Slug Blaster, and that was one of our major anchor projects for the spring, especially, which is I think when most like companies kind of like kick off and actually like get into gear with doing stuff. And it just didn't make sense to us to launch that project, especially if we had to announce a delay or postponement because of these tariffs. So we were in that tricky transparency communication kind of situation where it's like, okay, like we sort of have to schedule this because this is like a major thing that we're kind of relying on to bring in revenue. But at the same time, if we announce these, like, do we announce this delay? And it's like, okay, if we announce it and like we're scheduled to launch this project, like we're going to announce these delays and then launch the project, the expansion for the delayed product, that seems really weird, right? So like that was kind of like tricky to figure out. And we went like back and forth. We were like, okay, well, we still have to do it because like business wise, we just kind of have to unfortunately, like we just need to launch a campaign. But like, okay, that seems really weird. I would feel really weird if I was a backer or following the project. So like what is the best thing to do in this situation? And it kind of came down to, as kind of Fred said, just like transparency and communication. We're like, okay, well, we just need to let everybody know what's happening. So like let's just talk about it now. Let's announce the delay, which we did, and then let's delay the actual campaign and say like, listen, we're looking for solutions and we're figuring it out, and like we're operating under the assumption that it has to come down eventually, because if it doesn't, like the economy is really cooked, like writ large, and
So
yeah, and
So
we're basically like 2 weeks away from like the mass consumer like realizing that when they go into like Walmart or like Costco and being like, where is everything and why is everything that is here like 3 times more expensive, basically. So like I think when that happens, there's going to be a lot more pressure on the administration to fix things. But it's a weird and deadly game of chicken right now, because it's like we're counting on that, where we're assuming that cooler heads will prevail, but also like my team, I'm getting more antsy, right? Everyone's getting more antsy as this carries on, and I'm just like I'm just one small example, right? Like I have like 30 grand worth of goods, but there are companies out there with like millions of dollars of goods, right? So everyone is kind of in the same boat, and that is comforting in a way, because it's like, oh, we're all equally screwed? Question mark.
Right.
I mean, we're all sharing solutions as much as we can too,
Yeah.
right? So like there's a lot of inter-publisher communication going on, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious on your end, Fred. How is Evil Hat feeling, and how are you doing emotionally amidst the current state? Like, where are you guys at in this kind of uncertainty?
I will answer that in a moment. I did want to follow up on something that Ray was talking about with the tariff codes around books. So the thing is, ultimately, customs is made of people. And whether or not your tariff code is going to be consistently applied all the way through the chain of people that gets it from port to warehouse can strongly determine whether or not you're paying those tariffs. Like if somebody looks at a role-playing game, goes, oh, this is wrongly classified as a book because it says the word game on it, or it's meant to be engaged with more like a game than like a text. Suddenly, the thing that you thought you were bringing over with tariff exemption isn't. So like that uncertainty is present even in that part of things, let alone the bigger economic picture.
To add on to that, this is a bit of speculation at this point, but as Fred said, it's all people, but it's also like companies, right? So like if your freight forwarder works with a company that has like game in their name, right? And they've been importing things under a game tariff code for a really long time, and then all of a sudden it switches to a book tariff code, like that is like, put yourself in the custom border patrol shoes, right? Like, you're used to working with this company, you have shipments coming in from them every like couple of months or whatever, and all of a sudden something changes. So it's sort of about like the manufacturers and like the companies that you use and like what they're used to importing as well, and like whether there's like a sudden change and like whether or not that gets flagged or not.
I've got to imagine that also because there's been so much turmoil and like confusion coming from the current administration of just like, first it's 10%, then it's 50%, then it's 90%, then it's 135. It's just like, down the chain, if the guy who is literally scanning the code and pressing the button hasn't gotten the latest update, or has gotten 5 updates in the past week and doesn't know which one takes priority, all of a sudden you might be getting billed something way higher than what you should actually be getting billed, just because there's not a clear, it's just a confusing time. There's uncertainty.
The uncertainty is the biggest part going on here, really. I mean, because nobody wants to pay tariffs, but nobody wants to get in trouble for not paying them. And that second thing is actually much more potent in terms of the impacts I think it has throughout the chain. As far as how I'm feeling and how Evil Hat's doing, it's this thing where I get a little embarrassed, much like I was getting embarrassed during COVID, in that we did fine during COVID. And I think we're going to do, if all companies are falling, I think we're going to be towards the end of that because of a few choices that I just incidentally made due to being a frankly anxious person, generalized anxiety disorder diagnosis and everything, in that I have always kept a lot of like liquidity on hand with Evil Hat because like in the 90s, I saw a couple companies collapse due to like just fluctuations in currency exchange rates, right? And I'm like, I'm never going to live that close to the edge if I can avoid it. So, Evil Hat's been around like 19, 20 years at this point. I've allowed more accumulation than my accountant thinks I should. And then every time, COVID comes along, bam, I'm like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to be able to sell any physical games for at least 2 months here because Alliance is shut down. Cool. Can we handle that? Yep. So in terms of having a buffer to deal with the current circumstances, Evil Hat's doing fine. Additionally, I didn't like all of the variables that existed in the customs chain, even when it was functioning much more healthily. So as far as our just books, we've always printed those in the US. Because and this is one thing that I think TTRPGs in particular have a leg up on versus, say, a board game company or a boxed game company. Sorry, Ray. Is that the manufacturing capacity and the ability to be at least somewhat competitive once you factor in like ocean freight costs and customs clearance costs and all those other things that come along to affect your landed cost when you're doing an import. So that competitiveness in book printing, or at the very least, the idea that like we have our stuff currently warehoused with Atlas Games. The printer that we most often work with is like the next town over. So like I can say, okay, I've paid for these books as they've come off the presses. Could you ship them now? And they say yes, and they show up in a few days at the warehouse, the primary warehouse that we do our distribution from. So we have kind of backed into, without designing for this circumstance, but because I was afraid of some kind of circumstance coming up, into a strategy that's been fairly stable. It's not always the most cost effective. Like we could have been printing in China or other overseas options for the last 2 decades, and maybe the money that I'd have in that buffer would be bigger as a result of that, because you can still get, at least tariffs not included, a considerably lower price as far as the actual just manufacturing part of it goes from overseas vendors, because America got scared of holding on to its own production capacity a few decades ago and decided that outsourcing it to people that didn't have to be paid as much was the way to go. And here we are, the consequences of that. So I mean, again, for Evil Hat's take on things, we'll try to turn out the lights when we go. Because I think at that point, everything's done. But, there could be things that could come up. I mean, I also, published a game called Thirsty Sword Lesbians written by a trans author. So at some point, the administration might come after me as a pornographer, and that could be an existential threat too. Not, again, to go too far down the slalom into dark territory, but that's one of the things that hangs over me in terms of my emotional well-being. When you are as culturally left as Evil Hat is. And we are open about it. My social media manager, Tom Lommel, has my full permission to speak political views that we share in common through the Evil Hat account, because, he's going to take the same stance that I would, and probably in a way that pisses off fewer people. So, there's a reason I pay people for that sort of thing.
And I think you're speaking to kind of this thing that Ray brought up about the environment of fear that everyone's dealing with. There's this perspective that I struggle with, like kind of every day. And obviously I'm like itty bitty scale like as we move up the chain of publishers on the call right now, but like I'm still in a moment with a game that is printing in China right now, and it's like the question I deal with every day is like, do I move forward as if it is going to resolve, or do I take a wait and see approach? How long can I take a wait and see approach? And I don't even have employees, and like you both obviously have employees and contractors and stuff like that. So I'm curious for that question, how do you guys balance that question of like, how much do we move forward? How much do we wait and see? And like, when do those scales shift each day?
Well, having good data helps, and that's one thing that I've learned that I need to have better systems and data as we scale up, as we're dealing with more money. It's like, okay, keeping track of our P&Ls, our costs, and what we're spending and how much money we have in the bank, and extrapolating from that, like, okay, how much time do we have before we run out of money and stuff like that. So having kind of like the quantitative data to sort of back up the decision making has been like a major theme this year for us, even though we're a young company. And kind of funny, I actually had our weekly meeting just yesterday, and we're going through, we have like a scorecard for things, and like we're looking at it and we're like, okay, so like everything's going well except for the tariffs. Basically, like if these tariffs weren't happening, we would be
We'd
doing
be going
okay.
gangbusters. This would be great.
Yeah, which is like a very funny silver lining to have. But yeah, I mean, it's never easy, right? Like I think everybody like is kind of coping in their own way and dealing with things, but having the experience, right? Like I think Fred has a little bit more experience than me and has seen some of these seismic shifts before. So like in talking to like some of my mentors and other business people, like that's one of the things, right? It's like, it's at a certain point, it's just who survives, and it's whenever you do survive, like if we do end up surviving, there's always opportunity when it comes to moments of crisis. Like there's opportunities to kind of pick up the pieces, to consolidate, to become more of a leader in the space. So right now we're talking internally. It's like, okay, we're definitely in survival mode, and like let's go into survival mode and figure out what the last date is. Like for instance, of like when we have to launch the Slug Blaster expansion, because we simply can't wait any longer, right? Like we have to do that difficult math and be like, okay, this is the date. Like this is, because after this, we're probably gonna start bouncing on our invoices, right? So like stuff like that is important to understand and to just, I guess, use to make decisions.
I think Ray's right to be going into survival mode. I would counsel any publisher at this point, even ones that are firmly planted in US production, to go into survival mode, because it doesn't have to be directly, the chaos out there does not have to be directly affecting your means of production to end up affecting you.
It's the talk of the table.
And that is the end of the public preview of this special Patreon roundtable with Fred Hicks and Ray Chou. If you'd like to hear the rest of this conversation, head to patreon.com/manysidedmedia and join the dice pool to help support this show and help us keep making it and get access to a really great conversation. We hope to see you there.